facts tell, but the stories sell. But what works with a kindergartner works with everybody. A lot of kids might not remember 2 plus 2, but they'll always remember that story. Who is your audience? If your audience is everybody, your audience is nobody. Everybody in your audience peed their pants when they were 6 years old. That's a good story because people are going to see themselves in the story. The more narrow you are, the better you're going to be able to serve and understand your client. So who is your audience? A speech is kind of like real estate. Location, location, location. Where you say things matters. I want you to leave feeling better than when you came in. I want you laughing, smiling, happy. I don't think we need to hear another sad story. I think we need more stories of hope. Do you really want to talk about the worst moment of your life 1,000 times a year? When you're on stage, your audience actually wants you to succeed. You're on stage already demonstrates that you're extraordinary. Most people film themselves when they speak. I would encourage you to do the opposite. Film the audience. The audience is going to tell you everything you need to know.
Now, you have decades of experience public speaking and with publishing as well. Mm-hmm. And you've transitioned into business coaching and storytelling workshops. Could you talk about the transition there?
Yeah, if I was going to write an autobiography, it would probably be called Pivots, because I feel like I've already lived 9 lives. 30 years ago, I was a journalist covering President Bush Sr. for the 1992 presidential election. And I loved my job. I got to meet the editors of every major newspaper in the country. And one editor offered me a job doing the city beat for $16,500 a year. Meanwhile, a friend told me they were hiring teachers in South Central Los Angeles for $25,000 a year. So I became a teacher for the noblest of reasons, for the high pay. And I actually fell in love with teaching. And again, I've taught all age levels, just doing great. Then I became a professor. And in 2005, my wife and I attended a real estate seminar, which turned out to be a scam, and we lost everything. And I could focus on the negatives, but I'm a positive person. I look at all the important lessons. First of all, I learned that my wife is my soulmate. I put her through the ringer and she stuck right by me. She's an incredible human being. Second of all, I learned that money is not the end all be all, because you can lose it just like that. Third, I try not to judge other people, because if I was somebody who saw what I did, I would have said, well, you deserve that. But now I realize if you don't know everything about a person, you really don't know anything about a person. Fourth, I became Christian, which I'm always embarrassed to confess, but the more I read the Bible, I'm not the first screw up to find Jesus. And fifth, in order to avoid bankruptcy, my accountant told me I had to make this much more money this year. And so I started speaking on the side, and I hit his number right on the number. Well, the next year, David, he gave me a much higher number, and I hit that number right on the number. And so in year 3, I thought, well, maybe I should set a higher number. And so basically during one of the worst economic downturns in history, I was able to build up a very lucrative speaking business, which attracted the attention of some of the top speaking coaching companies on the planet. And so I started working with them, met the man who's my business partner now, Coach Jimmy Hayes Nelson. And Coach Jimmy and I, and then we have another partner, Dave Ward. I call us the professor, the performer, and the producer, because my background's in academia. Coach Jimmy came from Broadway, and Dave used to be an attorney. And the gap that we saw was we would have these 2-day seminars with high-end individuals, a lot of solopreneurs, executives, and they would pay $10,000 to be in a room with us for 2 days where we helped them put together their presentation. And the problem is, it was only 2 days and we never got to track them. You have to understand this about me as a teacher and as a coach. I've always had a very high standard for my students. I actually will not let you fail. Like, I'm going to be on you until you succeed. And it was not gratifying to me to coach people for 2 days and then let them wander off. The poor people that have me as a coach now, I always tell them, just so you know, I'm a coach for life. I'll be checking in on you because I want to make sure you're succeeding. And it's actually wonderful working with entrepreneurs and small business owners. I got the big name clients too, but the people that gratify me the most are people that I'm able to transform their business by showing them how to use speaking as that most powerful outlet. So I don't know if that's a very roundabout answer to your question, David, but I've gone all over the place, and I'm enjoying what I do now more than anything I've ever done.
Nice. Danny, there's so many things in there that I want to unpack, but coming to the coaching being something that really it gives that longer term accountability, and it leans more into how humans develop. We don't learn anything in one go most of the time. We need consistent exposure, tweaking, soundboards. Why do you think it is? Because I work in sales training mainly, and also speaking workshops and coaching. And I find it really strange that corporate is set up to pay for 1 day training on whatever, customer service, sales, whatever, and that's it. And a lot of them are quite resistant to longer term coaching, even if it might cost the same. I wonder what your thoughts are on that and why you think it's set up that way. That seems to be counterintuitive to how we actually develop.
Thank you for that question, Becca. You and I are two peas in a pod. I couldn't agree more. I was going through, when I was teaching my first graders, I remember I was going through the state standards, and there was 180 math standards, and I had 300 standards, and I had 180 days to teach them, and it would be me saying, "Oh, Becky, man, I'm so sorry you missed school on Tuesday. That's when we learn how to add." It's the same thing I see happening all the time in corporate development is, hey, we're going to do diversity training on Wednesday. And now you know everything you need to know about diversity, and it's not the matrix. We don't insert a chip in you and you get it in 10 seconds. You need the reps. I was working with a gentleman, Scott, and I had helped him put together his presentation for 2 days, and he started speaking around the world. And he's like, "Danny, I don't know what's going on. The audiences, they love my presentation, but I'm not converting." I'm like, "Well, send me the video. Show me what you're doing." So he sent me the video, and I identified it within 3 seconds. I'm like, "Scott, this goes here." A speech is kind of like real estate. Location, location, location. Where you say things matters. And this was just one little tweak that we made to Scott's presentation. And now he's booked through the end of September. He's making more money than he's ever made, and he's thanking me. I'm like, "Well, you're the one that did the work." I mean, this is what I love about coaching is I get to play Yoda instead of Luke Skywalker. He's the hero. He's the one that did all the work. I'm just the one that kind of guided him. And I completely agree with you, Becky. That's the failure I see in most training is it's this one stop, and most of us, we need lots of repetition. I mean, everything requires repetition, repetition, repetition. I mean, I always tell people there's 2 ways you get better at speaking. First of all, you got to watch a lot of speakers. I mean, I watch 10 speakers a day. I watch politicians. I watch comedians. I watch televangelists. I watch them in front of big groups, in front of small groups, in front of men, in front of women. Here, I'll give you a ninja strategy I share with my clients. I watch a lot of televised award shows because when the person wins the Academy Award, they only have 45 seconds to connect with their audience. I want to see how they use their time. Now, most people waste their time. They get up there like, "I want to thank God. I want to thank the Academy." It's stupid. Nobody's paying attention. But every now and then, a person does an incredible job. So a few years ago, there was a guy by the name of Joe Walker who won the Academy Award for Best Film Editing. Now, this is Hollywood. All the important people are in the front, the actors. And it's film editing. You can tell the camera's scanning. Nobody's paying attention. And Joe Walker gets on stage. He's British. He speaks very slowly and deliberately. He says, "A lot of people don't know this, but when phrased properly, the term Academy Award nominee can be used as an insult." Well, now the camera's scanning. You see people kind of leaning in like, "What's he talking about?" He says, "For example, yesterday I got in an argument with my 17-year-old daughter, and she said, 'Well, Academy Award nominee Joe Walker.'" All of a sudden, you see everybody laughing hysterically. He gets off stage. Denzel Washington wants to meet him. Sandra Bullock wants to meet him. Brad Pitt wants to meet him. Time magazine said it was one of the highlights of the Academy Awards. 45 seconds, well spent. So the first way you get better at speaking is by watching lots of speakers. The second way is I've been blessed. I've had lots of wonderful coaches and mentors in my life. And one of them was a gentleman by the name of Jim Rohn. And Jim used to say, "You can't pay other people to do your push-ups." Translation, you got to do the work. And this is exactly what we were talking about, Becky. I mean, you got to get out there and speak and speak and speak. You're not... I had a guy I was working with 3 years ago, Jason. Jason drove me nuts. I said exactly the same thing. I'm like, "You got to watch people. You got to do your reps." He's like, I don't know how to get a speaking engagement. I'm like, even the smallest towns have a Lions Club, an Optimist Club, a Rotary Club, a Kiwanis Club. They got schools. They got synagogues, churches, chambers of commerce. There's all kinds of. He's 22 and he was just driving me nuts. He was a Debbie Downer. "I don't know anybody, Danny." I'm like, "All right, Fine. Do you have a Facebook account? He's like, yeah. I'm like, we're going on right now. Facebook Live. You're going to give your presentation. We just put together his 45-minute presentation. He gets freaked out. He's like, I can't do it. I'm like, we're going on right now. So he gave his talk for 45 minutes. Some woman from Ontario, Canada, accidentally watched him. And guess what? He sucked. And I told him, you got to do it the next day. I didn't watch him the next day. He said that 3 people watched him. And guess what? He sucked. But he didn't suck as bad as he did the first time. Here's the reason I give Jason as an example. He's gone on Facebook Live every single day at the same time for the last 3 years, including Christmas. He now has 6,000 people in his community. And last year, he sold almost $1 million worth of products to those 6,000 people. Now, he's all excited about that. The reason I use him as an example is the consistency. He did the work. And this is what gives me, a lot of people, fulfillment means cashing the check. To me, fulfillment is watching you explode. I want you to be huge. And the way you're going to be huge is you're going to do the work. You got to practice, practice, practice. This goes exactly to what you're saying, Becky. One shot doesn't work it. You don't master anything in one shot. You need lots of practice, practice, practice for that muscle memory.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, I think, especially with, well, there's bravery there in going out live to do that. I had a client once who, he's an attorney or barrister, one of those, and his job is to speak in court, and he's managed not to for 12 years. He's always had somebody else pick it up for him, which is quite an incredible feat in and of itself that he managed to dodge it for that. And for him, it was about doing that small step of standing up in the internal meeting with 3 people. And then standing up in the really small court case that doesn't really matter what happens, where you're just introducing something. And then somebody else can take it from there. But exposure therapy, really, isn't it? It's put yourself in that space all the time. The more you do it, the less uncomfortable it becomes and the more skilled you become.
Yep, well said.
So, David, do you want to jump in there?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'd like to talk about storytelling as a superpower there, Danny. The stories we tell ourselves very much determine our reality.
Mm-hmm.
It might not sound logical to some people, but I've seen it to be true time and again. I was talking to Becky before the call about like the Schrodinger's cat, like, the cat's dead or the cat's alive, depending on the story that you tell yourself, essentially. And you have this 5-step blueprint for story building with core message, emotional hook, structured arc, multi-platform adaptability, and making the audience the hero. Could you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah. So forgive me, David and Becky, I'm a former school teacher, so everything has to like either be alliterative or a rhyme or something. And so I have a 5C process that I take my clients through, beginning with the first C. Before you write your speech, we have 2 clarity questions. So clarity is the first C in the 5C process. Those first 2 questions, if you can answer them, you're in good shape. If you cannot answer them, you're going to have a really difficult time expanding your business and growing your client base. Those 2 questions are, who is your audience? Is the first one. Now, a lot of people say, my audience is everybody. I'm like, well, if your audience is everybody, your audience is nobody. I believe that, it's been said before, the riches are in the niches. I have a client, Kathy. I love to brag about Kathy. So here's what Kathy does for a living. She makes saddles for professional polo players. I'm like, wow, that's a niche. I'm like, how much money you make last year? She's like, $800,000. I'm like, I need to learn how to make saddles for professional polo players. That's incredible. It's amazing. It sounds very counterintuitive, but the more narrow you are, the better you're going to be able to serve and understand your client. So who is your audience? And obviously you can expand your client base. So for example, when I first started speaking, I was a former teacher. So I started by speaking to teachers. And then I started speaking to parent groups. And then I started speaking to school administrative groups. And then I was in a mastermind. And one of the guys in my mastermind, very successful businessman, he wanted me to train his sales force. And I said, Todd, I don't know if I'm actually qualified to train your sales force. I'm just a former teacher. And he's like, Danny, if you can get middle school teenage boys to read Shakespeare's, I'm pretty sure that you can motivate my sales force. And it was great. He did me a huge favor. He got me to expand my point of view. I'm like, oh, I guess that is applicable. And so now, I speak to lots of different audiences. And so the first question is, who is your audience? And then the second question, these seem obvious, but I'll tell you right now, 95% of my clients can't answer one or both of them the first time I meet them. The second question is, what's the problem that you solve? The biggest mistake I see with most people is they don't state a problem, they state their solution. And the reason that's important is Donald Miller has a great company called StoryBrand. I'm a big fan of him. And he's always said that your job as a coach, as a speaker on stage, is you are the guide and your audience is the hero. And so you got to stop looking at your solution and look at their problem. So, for example, I was working with a fitness instructor. I said, well, what's the problem that you solved? And she said, healthy living. I'm like, well, healthy living is not a problem. That's a solution. Maybe the problem that you're solving is obesity. She said, oh, okay. I work with a lot of financial planners. Financial planners, I'm always asking them, what's the problem that you solve? They'll say, healthy retirement. Well, healthy retirement, that's a solution. Maybe the problem that you're solving is making sure people have enough money until the day they die. That's a problem. And so just by phrasing it in a way that, because people don't care about your solution, they care about their problem. That's what you want to be thinking about all the time, is what's keeping this audience up at night? What is the problem that's just how can I help them solve that problem? So that's the clarity. And then we get into the other 4 C's, which is the actual meat of your speech. And those are to connect with your audience. You teach your content, and there's a strategic way to teach that content. Then you have one clear call to action. And then finally, you end with an emotional close that gets people to really want to take the next step with you. And that's really the only way I evaluate my effectiveness as your coach is, some people would come up and, oh, I got a standing ovation. I'm like, that's great. Some people say, oh, everybody thinks I'm a great speaker. I'm like, that's great. But the only way we're going to evaluate your effectiveness is how many people in your audience decide to take that next step with you. Now, it can be unpaid or paid. It could be unpaid. It could be like for your podcast, hey, subscribe to my podcast, or book a phone call with me. It can be paid, like buy my product or invest in my coaching program. This is the biggest mistake I see. Well, the 2 biggest mistakes I see that most people make in presentations are in the connection and in the call to action. So the biggest mistake I see people make is in connection. They brag. And I'm like, there's a place for bragging. But here's what I always tell people. Stop sharing your successes. Start talking about your failures, because not everybody in your audience has succeeded, but they've all failed. And the more you reveal your own vulnerability, Brene Brown's a wonderful speaker. She talks about the importance of vulnerability. I completely agree with her on that. The more you share your own trials and tribulations, the more the audience is going to see themselves in you, and that's more powerful. The second biggest mistake I see is usually in the call to action, and that is that people have more than one call to action. And you just have to understand the human brain doesn't like choices. I always say choices confuse and cause you to lose. The example I always give is if you look at the number 1 grocery store on the planet based on sales volume, it's Trader Joe's. And
Nice.
the reason is if you go to a regular grocery store and you want to get mustard, there's 28 different types of mustard. If you go to Trader Joe's to get
the
mustard,
best mustard,
there's mustard. That's your choice. They've made it for you. People don't
Monsieur
like
mustard, probably Monsieur Joe's or whatever Joe is in French.
People don't like choice. I mean, I was on a podcast earlier today, and at the end of the podcast, the host said, oh, hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, and give us a 5-star review. And after we got off air, I said, you just gave your audience 3 calls to action. They ain't going to do any of them.
Yeah.
Be very clear.
There's a lot there, Danny, that I wanted to touch on. So one, when you mentioned about Brene Brown and not necessarily bragging, I have, like many people perhaps, faced imposter syndrome, have different kind of ways that I deal with getting what I want or feeling safe or whatever. And sometimes that serves me, sometimes it doesn't. And so I was like looking at people that were doing better than me and trying to see like, how are they doing what they're doing? And what's interesting about that is like, you're not really seeing it. You're seeing parts of it. You're seeing parts that resonate with you, or so you're only seeing a fraction of the whole. One thing I saw was my superior in this example was leading with examples of his successes. But he had this way of talking that it kind of worked without sounding braggadocious. But my discomfort kind of came through in doing that it just seemed like forced. And there's, I think, like an element of insecurity, like needing to prove. And it's like, and I think on a human, like animalistic level, you're kind of reading a lot more than you're like cognitively aware of or consciously aware of. And so you're picking up on a lot of the full stack that affects how you're interpreting the words that I'm saying. And so I think that I agree with everything you say. I certainly don't disagree with it. However, I think there's another element perhaps. When you start with sharing your vulnerabilities, if you're doing it in an authentic way and not trying to manipulate my empathy or not trying to get me to sign on the dotted line right after or something like that, there's a way in which you're actually communicating a great amount of confidence, a great amount of strength. And you wonder, like, how successful must this person be that they'd be that comfortable, A, standing on stage, B, talking about the things that terrify me at night. And so in a way, you're actually communicating a lot more than you could. I help Fortune 500 executives and this and that. So there's like the kind of art of advertising without advertising, so to speak. How does that, what do you think about that?
I love that. I think it's actually one of the things that distinguishes me as a coach, because one of the coaching companies I worked with, and they're number one in the world, they always said, okay, you need to really dive into the most tragic experience of your life and really share that with your audience. And there's 3 reasons why I don't do that. First of all, the world just survived a global pandemic. Everybody's had bad stuff happen to them. I don't think we need to hear another sad story. I think we need more stories of hope. Second of all, I'm teaching my clients how to create what I call a well-crafted story. When I covered the president 30 years ago, he would have called it his stump speech. Superhero movies, they call it your origin story. You can call it peanut butter and jelly. It doesn't matter. What this is this is a story you're going to deliver again and again to new audiences, to introduce yourself to new audiences, to get them to want to be your clients. I'm like, do you really want to talk about the worst moment of your life 1,000 times a year? I mean, I have a friend, his daughter was killed in a school shooting, and he delivers that speech all the time. I have no idea how he does that. You'd have to be a lot stronger than me to deliver that speech all the time. And then the third reason I don't do that, and this is where people get angry with me, I have one objective when I'm on stage. I want you to leave feeling better than when you came in. I want you laughing, smiling, happy. I think there's something admirable about that as an objective. I believe that the people that tell that same sad story again and again, this gets to your point, David, by the 20th time they're telling that story, those are crocodile tears now. And now you're being manipulative. And I'm not saying it's not an effective sales strategy. It's actually a very effective sales strategy. But I, for one, don't want to have to take a shower after I get off stage because I just manipulated my audience. There are more ethical ways to get people to want to do business with you. And I actually resent the speakers that love to dive into those sad stories and, oh, here's the trauma that I went through. And, you know, I don't, and don't get me wrong, trauma's all right, but there has to be a happy ending. This is why I like watching American movies versus French movies. If Julia Roberts dies in the middle of a movie, I know they'll resuscitate her by the end of the American movie. If she dies in a French
Steel
movie,
Magnolias.
Yeah, when she dies in a French movie, I turn to my wife. I'm like, I think she's actually dead. It's like,
I think they might have killed the actress.
Depressing, man. Life's too short.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And kind of somewhat connects to an earlier point you mentioned that I wanted to touch on regarding the solutions versus the problem. And I think it's where you're focusing. If my concern is how you think of me, and I want you to categorize me in a favorable way to me, that's going to come across in probably a few, like I mentioned, that full stack, like probably a few areas that you'll pick up on, and something will just be a little bit off, and I'll have to try extra hard to kind of force the conversion. And, you know, some people, like you said, are really good at it, but I don't think it scales as well, rather than just getting it from the seed or like the ground up. And I found myself, like I get nervous, or I got more nervous in the past speaking in front of others. And I realized for myself anyway, that it was because I was worried about what they thought about me. And then I was in a job that basically forced me to just solve problems for a bunch of people. And I realized I wasn't nervous. And I was like, why is that? And then I kind of got to the same point that you're making, which is like, I wasn't focused on me. I was focused on solving problems for other people. So when it comes to marketing, I see a corollary where people often, they could be a specialist and amazing at what they do, but the way that they communicate it is like communicating ingredients on the menu instead of showing you a picture of the finished dish that you want to eat. And so I'm curious, in your experience, why do you think it is that there's this holdup between wanting to communicate our solution rather than focusing on the problem that we're solving? Because it seems to be pretty common.
You already hit upon it, David. It's ego. And that's why I hate the term servant leader, because by definition, a leader is a servant. That you're here to help other people all the time. And when you put I tell this to people all the time, that feel they're nervous about sounding salesy. I'm like, here's the tip. I broke my rule. I give tips to waiters. I give strategies to the people I work with. Okay. So here's the strategy. Stop selling. Start serving. I think you have a responsibility when you're on stage. People have given you their most valuable asset, their time. And I believe you have a responsibility to help them as much as you can while you're on stage. And so one of the things that I go through with clients is I want you to give, I call it the Home Depot. We need to provide a short-term solution and a long-term solution. Why do I call it the Home Depot? You can do it, we can help. The short-term solution is a quick win for your audience. That's like, wow, this is easy. The long-term solution is, yeah, but I need Danny to help me out. So a quick term was what I used to do with the speaking companies. We can help you put together a speech in 2 days. Heck, I'll give you all the information you need. I'll give you the 5 C's. I'll give you the whole process. Here's what you need to know, though. One rep ain't going to do it. You need somebody to help you out along the way. I'll be able to show you. I'm like a chiropractor. I can figure out, okay, well, here's where you missed this point, and okay, this was stronger. You need a better pause here. There's just it's just like anything. I mean, I'm a big believer in coaches. I mean, look at the most successful people in the world have coaches. Tiger Woods, when he was the greatest golfer, he had a mental coach. He had a putting coach. He had a driving coach. Maybe he should have hired a relationship coach, but he understood the power of coaches. And I've had coaches throughout my life. And I mean, I have a marketing coach. I have an AI coach. I have a sales coach. And the reason I hire them is because they know more than me. This is what you're trying to do on stage. One of the speaking companies I worked with, they said, well, in the first 5 minutes, you have to show people you're extraordinary, show them you're ordinary, and demonstrate your why. I don't believe you do have to show that you're extraordinary. The fact that you're on stage already demonstrates that you're extraordinary. One little ninja strategy I share with people is if you really want to sound extraordinary, make sure that you've personally written an introduction that the person introducing you makes you sound like Jesus Christ, because then I get to come on stage and like, yeah, Jesus Christ forgot to wear his dress socks today. Now everybody's like, oh, he's successful, but he's just like me. It's very important to be able to have that. I've been working with a lot of politicians in recent years, and I always joke with them. I'm like, you ever notice that no presidential candidate ever grew up middle class? They all grew up poor in a log cabin because they have to show their struggles. It's a story. It's a format. It's the same thing as a Disney movie or a Pixar movie. I can tell you what's going to happen because I know the format.
So I want to come back to, again, few things there. So back to the problem solution issue there. So I find that if the client I'm working with is a founder or a solopreneur, they can quite easily articulate a problem that they solve because they've probably been through the problem themselves. That's why they've created what they've created to be the solution. I find salespeople really, really struggle with it. When I ask them, why would somebody want your service? Let's say, for example, it's a SaaS product. And they say, oh, because it's quick. I'm like, great, loads of things are quick. Like, why would they need that? And they can't quite, even if they can articulate the problem. If I then ask them, and why is that a problem? Why is it being slow, having to use multiple products, a problem? And they can't think about it because they've not been there before. So I think there's an element of empathy to be able to really understand the problems that others go through. But coming back to the authenticity of myself in the story and being able to be the kind of the arc of I failed here and I did these things, but I've come out the other side and here's what I can teach you. In having experienced it yourself, you're very able to connect with what that is, why that would be a problem, the effect it has on different areas. But we don't always have that, I was going to say privilege, I guess, of having experienced the problem. So to people that are representatives, so salespeople or presenters that are hired by a company that don't understand the problem themselves, how would you say that they can connect with their audience?
Well, first of all, they should understand the problem. That's a very important thing. Once they understand the problem, so here's an exercise I give with people. This is for your audience right now. Is later on, once you sit in a comfy chair with a pen and paper, libation of choice beside you. And for an hour, I want you to write down every story that's ever happened to you. And I don't mean the entire story. I just mean triggers, like the time I locked myself out of the car in front of the supermarket, the time that dad spilt mustard on his tie at that fancy restaurant. You'll find in like an hour, you can come up with 500 little triggers like that. So that's the first part of the exercise. The second part of the exercise is then I want you to figure out, what's this story really about? Oh, this is a story about never giving up. Oh, this is a story about loyalty. Oh, here's a story about trust, building trust. I mean, on my computer, I have hundreds of files with tens of thousands of stories like this. So whenever I'm trying to create a point, and I've always said this is where I liked humor. I like to do stories from my childhood because they're very harmless, because all of us make a lot of mistakes I always tell people it's all right if you were in prison and share that you were in prison. It's not all right if you got released yesterday. There's a difference there. And so I give stories constantly about my childhood, or, because I'm working with a guy right now. He's climbed the highest peak on all 7 continents. He swam with sharks in Madagascar. He did the Iditarod. I'm like, nobody can relate to you, man. You're crazy. Like, nobody in your audience has done that. But everybody in your audience peed their pants when they were 6 years old. That's a good story, because people are going to see themselves in the story. That's what you're always trying to do, is how do I get people to see themselves? So like with a sales representative, I'll give you an example. I was working with a guy about a year ago, and he does safety trainings. And so the people he's always dealing with are like the guys on the docks, kind of a hard bunch. When he's telling them, he could just tell them why they need to keep safety first, but that's not as effective as telling a story. And so what he did is he created a story called Two Finger Joe. He's like, oh yeah, Two Finger Joe, he didn't do this and he lost 3 of his fingers, and he couldn't button his daughter's dress for her wedding because he only had 2 fingers. He has trouble holding his grandkid because he only has 2 fingers. And safety at that plant went up like 48% after he did this presentation, because he framed it in a story. People remember the stories. I can't give you. There's so many countless examples of people it's biblical. I mean, Jesus was a really good storyteller. He's just frustrated with people. He's like, all right. He's like, okay, my den's 12 apart. All right, here we go. Okay, so here's a story of a prodigal son. So he tells a story because that's how people, oh yeah, I remember that. David and Goliath, that's a story. I remember it because it's a story. How do we make the story? And then every now and then I work with a difficult person. Like, I have no stories. So I always send them to the book. One of the most successful personal development books of all time is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, in which he shares no personal stories. What he did is he interviewed a whole bunch of millionaires and shared their stories. So you don't always have to share your own story if you're very uncomfortable doing that. Share other people's stories. That there's just as much. I mean, you watch some of the athletes I work with, the coaches, that's what they're constantly doing, is they're giving stories from different athletic points of view. So yeah, but you definitely have to understand your problem first. And if I'm working with a sales team and they don't understand the problem, first we're going to understand that problem, and then we're going to learn how that's my problem. How do you make that your problem? I want you to personalize it. Think about if that was if you're in the healthcare industry, if this was your mother, is this the type of healthcare you would want her to get? Is this the treatment that you would want? When you start personalizing it for yourself, you're going to get your audience. And this is, using the 5 senses, really getting people to what are the tastes that you have? What are the smells, the sounds happening as you do this? If you can do that effectively, then you're going to be a very powerful speaker.
It's really interesting what you say about the Bible, because it's so true. Those stories have lasted for thousands of years, and we remember them. Even if we're not religious, even if we weren't brought up religious, there are still stories that stick out. Whereas I think it's Leviticus that's just got the list of all the rules, what you can and cannot eat and who you can and cannot sleep with and all of that. I don't think people really remember those things, like you must do this or you must do that. But you remember the story of the burning bush, or you remember the story of Noah's Ark, for example, that's been a movie now multiple times. So that it comes back to what you were saying right at the start about the power of stories, how they stick with people and how they not just engage you in the moment, but stay in your brain long after, which I think is a magical thing, really, as to the way our brains work. I wanted to ask you, so your final C is close, an emotional close, after the CTA. Now, a lot of people, when they present, finish with their CTA, or even worse, thank you, any questions, right? That would be the worst version of that. Can you give an example maybe of someone you've worked with, that what their emotional close was, and how you get emotion into a close so that you can connect again at that?
Yeah, so I think what the most effective close is, we have different ways of doing that. One's called the wrap around, where whatever your opening story was, we wrap it around to your closing story and it resolves. And then people realize that once the story's over, the presentation's over. As I get older, it kills me because all of my childhood idols turn out to be scumbags. But growing up, my idol was Bill Cosby. And Bill Cosby was the master of a wraparound. He could talk about nothing for 90 minutes and he has you laughing the entire time because of the details. And he's always a genius at taking his first story and wrapping it up to be the last story. That's called a wraparound. Another thing that we use is a tool called the repeated stem, and this is using a phrase but changing the ending as you do it. So, for example, the most famous one would be Martin Luther King. I have a dream. I have a dream that and everybody says he did it 3 times. I think he actually did it 7 times, and his endings were very long and everything. But you remember, I have a dream. Winston Churchill. We shall never surrender. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall do. That was a good repeated stem. And then the third option, which most of the people I work with prefer to do, is just have a different type of story that has nothing to do with what you've been speaking about. And so what I like to do is to craft a story that has the audience do whatever you want them to do. So, for example, let's say the point in my call to action, I've established that I'm the expert. You should hire me as a coach. So I need to hire an expert story. So I'll do my call to action. Then I take my deep breath. I'll leave you with this. Many years ago, my wife and I had theater tickets. We were dressed to the nines. As we were driving to the theater, we got a flat tire. And my wife said, "Oh, I'll call a tow truck." I'm like, "We don't need to call a tow truck. I'm a man. I can fix a flat tire." So I opened up the trunk. I got the spare tire. I got the pumper thingy and the thing that's shaped like a big jack. And I was trying to take out the nuts on the tire. 27 minutes later, I have grease all over me. The flat tire has not been changed. My wife is shaking her head like, I could have done so much better than this guy. Well, unbeknownst to me, she'd actually called the tow truck company. And this 17-year-old punk hops out of his tow truck, and in 3 minutes flat, he fixes the flat tire. I think there are times in life when all of us think we can do it ourselves. But if you want to save time, you want to save money, you want to save a whole lot of headaches, you hire an expert. So to me, that's an effective way to close. You're using something that has nothing to do with your topic, whatever your topic has been. How can I just give a random anecdote? And I like the most basic things. All of us as spouses have had that argument with our spouse. Hey, the toilet paper, the paper should be over, not under. No, it should be under, not over. Or no, this is the proper way to cook pasta. All of us have those ridiculous arguments. And that's what you're trying to do, is you don't have to sound smart. This is a big thing. It's actually kind of funny. One of my coaches, he coached me for 3 years. He's like, "Danny, I didn't know you're a doctor." I'm like, "Well, I know I'm a doctor. I don't brag about it or anything. I know I'm a doctor." And if you look at successful people, I'm sure Jeff Bezos, when he introduces himself to people, he doesn't say, "Hi, I'm Jeff. I'm the founder of Amazon." I'm sure he's just like, "Hey, I'm J Rule," whatever. Because he's to me, that's how you exude confidence. Oprah, she's so confident, she doesn't even have a last name to most people. She's Oprah.
Yeah.
Like, that's a pretty darn good, that's what I really want in life. I want it so when I'm introduced, the people that really haven't accomplished anything, their introductions are like 3 pages long. The people that have accomplished a lot, ladies and gentlemen, Bono. That's somebody that has power, and that's what I want to convey. So the roundabout answer to your question, Becky, is your emotional close should be a way that really, I want people leaving with you on their lips. I got to work with Becky. I got to work with Becky. I mean, I was at an event and it was with a lot of athletes, famous athletes. And the last two speakers were Peter Vidmark and Mary Lou Retton, a 1984 Olympic gold medalist in gymnastics. And at the end of their presentation, they did backflips. And I'm like, oh, I need to learn how to do a backflip. That was the coolest ending I've ever seen to a presentation. One of my mentors was a guy named Zig Ziglar, and Zig, he had a book called "See You at the Top," and to me, it's still the best crafted presentation I've ever seen in my life, because at the end of his presentation, he says, "Now I know a lot of us, we're on rough seas. You know, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, it can get rough, and we just want to go beneath deck, but I'm told that's not what you should do. No, if all of us are going to have those experiences where we have those rough waters, but I got to tell you, what you have to do is you got to look up. You got to keep on looking up. And believe me, if you look up, I will see you at the top." I'm like, you ended your presentation with the title of your book. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I mean, there's nothing. This is why I like watching speakers. I just love seeing, wow, the best comedians are so good at, I'm like, oh, how did he do that? Brene Brown, the way she's able to interact with an audience, I'm like, gosh, she's masterful at those types of things. So that's, again, I'm a geek with this kind of stuff, but I get very excited because I've had to sit through so many bad presentations. There's nothing worse than a bad presentation. Here's something your audience needs to know. When you're on stage, your audience actually wants you to succeed, because there's nothing worse than sitting and watching a person struggle. It's uncomfortable for everybody, and this kind of goes to something you were talking about, David, when you're talking about you're nervous. I always tell people, if you're nervous, tell your audience you're nervous, because people are actually a lot cooler than we think they are. People be like, no, you can do it. You can do it, David. People start, you might actually be able to build empathy just by doing that. Like, hey, if you've watched, actually, I watch comedians all the time. Comedians are masterful at this. They're the best at this. Kevin Hart is a short black guy. So what does he do? He makes a lot of jokes about being a short black guy. Jim Gaffigan is a big fat white guy. So what does he do? He makes a lot of jokes about being a big fat white guy. By making the issue and illuminating it to your audience, it's no longer an issue. Now everybody's completely comfortable, and that's masterful to me.
Mm-hmm.
You give over 100 keynotes per year. How does that fuel your insight into audience psychology? Are you still surprised, or are there like many patterns now that you see?
I don't know if there's patterns so much, David, but you learn something every single time. I love this is actually one of the things here's something for your audience is most people film themselves when they speak. I would encourage you to do the opposite. Film the audience. The audience is going to tell you everything you need to know. When you see people leaning in, oh, that was important. What that point is, if you see them on their phones, they're not interested. What can I do to interact better with them? I love things that are just unplanned. So I was speaking in Wichita, Kansas once, and a tornado hit and we lost power. And I asked the janitor for a flashlight, and I did the next 90 minutes in the dark. I'm like, ooh, I can do it in the dark. I was touring schools in India. I went to this one school, and the principal, he opens up a door. There's 5,000 kids in an auditorium. There's like 20 newspapers, 5 TV stations. And he says, oh, for the next hour, Dr. Brassell is going to teach us the 3 secrets to reading better. David, Becky, nobody's told me I'm speaking, and I have no such speech, and he wants me to speak for 60 minutes, and I've got 5,000 kids, and I got live media there. So fortunately, it's India. I get to speak slower. So I look at the kids. I'm like, today, I am going to teach you the 3 secrets to reading better. Who wants to learn the 3 secrets to reading better? And the kids are going wild. And in my head, I'm like, what the heck are the 3 secrets to reading better? And using the exact structure I'm teaching you guys today, in my head, I put together in 30 seconds a presentation that went out to 1.5 billion people. And now as a company, one of my companies is based on that presentation. And so And I use, again, addressing your question, David, I use humor all the time. And so sometimes I'm trying a new joke. So I'm watching the audience and I'm like, they didn't laugh in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Is it the joke or is it Fort Wayne, Indiana? So then I try it again in Augusta, Georgia. I'm like, they didn't laugh in Augusta. Maybe it's the joke. Let me try it in Abilene, Texas. No, they didn't laugh. It's a bad joke. I got to get rid of the joke. Constantly watch. And then sometimes, I had a guy for 2 days straight watching me in my front row with his arms crossed, looking at me like I had just murdered somebody dear to him. And he comes up to me at the end of the second day. I'm like, here we go. And without breaking his expression, he looks at me. He's like, I just want to tell you, Danny, you're the funniest speaker I've ever seen. And that was an important lesson. It taught me, don't always look at the face. I speak to, probably one of my favorite speeches was to the Six Nations tribe in Edmonton in January. It was a heat wave last January. It was only -18 in Edmonton. And the Six Nations tribe, the chief was great. He comes up to me and he says, so Danny, have you been to our casino yet? I'm like, no, chief, but I will go to the casino, I promise. And he says, only one machine give out money, ATM. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's fantastic. But he never breaks his expression. And so I learned you can't always read the faces too. And I thought about it. I've been in audiences where I might not look like I'm into it, but I'm actually really into it. But I might not be going along with everything. And so I had a woman once in my front row. She was on her phone the whole dang time. And I wanted to say something, but I bit my tongue. Thank God I bit my tongue, because at the end of the presentation, she came up, she's like, you're so amazing. I was telling my friends to leave their sessions and come to yours. I'm like, ooh. She was texting everybody. Lessons from, and it's interesting speaking to different. One of my positions is I'm a visiting distinguished professor at the American University in Cairo, in Egypt. Say that 5 times fast. And so every time I go there, I like to do presentations for the surrounding schools. And so I went to this Muslim school, and I was very nervous. I'm like, here's a Christian guy speaking to an Islamic school. I don't know if this is going to go over so well. And it was 2:00 in the afternoon. 400 parents showed up. All the guys had the long beards. All the women were in burqas. And we were talking like the 3 of us are talking right now. And I'm like, shame on me. And I started off my presentation. I said, so I was reading this book the other day. Have any of you ever read the Quran? And they all start laughing. I'm like, oh, well, then you know the story when the angel Gabriel appears in the cave with Muhammad. What's the first thing he tells Muhammad? Because the first pillar of Islam is to read. And so I looked at the parents. I'm like, so not only should we get your kids reading, it's actually written in your most sacred text. It's your duty to get your kids reading. And I had 400 heads nodding in agreement. I'm like, who would have ever thought the Christian dude's favorite audiences are Muslims? I love speaking to Muslim audience, my favorite people on the planet. But I only got that because trial by fire. Same thing with you, David, Becky. How many of your friends say, oh, I'm going to start a podcast? They never do anything. You guys did it. And I guarantee you the first one stunk. The second one stunk a little bit less, but you've been doing it so much now. Well-oiled machine. You can give advice. You can coach others on how to create a podcast. And it's the same thing with speaking. It's a skill that can be taught and mastered as you go along.
Well, you gave us a lot of food for thought. I could easily talk with you for another hour. But as we wrap up, I'd like to hand the mic back to you one last time. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you would you think we should mention? And then please also tell folks where they can follow you and get in touch with you if they like.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, David, and you, Becky, for listening to me. I know I get long-winded. I get very excited and geek out on this stuff. So thanks for letting me share these stories. And as a thank you to you and your audience for listening to me, I want to give everybody a freebie. So if you go to freestoryguide.com, guide like a tour guide, freestoryguide.com, I'm going to give everybody their own storytelling blueprint. What this is the actual process I take clients through on how to develop their own well-crafted story. What this does for you is it takes the guesswork out of where to put what in your presentation. And what this means for you is the peace of mind that I'm going to get more clients, have more impact, and really make a bigger difference in the world. You get that at freestoryguide.com. And I just want to thank you guys for giving me this platform today, and keep on doing all that you do. Your positive energy, we need a lot more of you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure speaking with you, Danny.